Now, here's Ed Bernstein.
Hi, welcome to our show. A little bit later, if you're a Neil Diamond fan, you'll want to stay tuned for that. But this November, we have a ballot question. Question number 2. And let me read the ballot question. Shall Nevada law be amended to make the possession and use of marijuana legal for people who are at least 21 years old and to require state licensing of marijuana growers, testing facilities, and retailers with tax revenues to cover the cost of regulation and to support K through 12 education, also known as recreational marijuana? As our viewers know, you have medical marijuana now, and with me today is Amanda Connor, who's an attorney that does a lot of marijuana-related work and licensing, and Rob Campia, who's, what's the organization you belong to?
It's the Marijuana Policy Project in Washington, D.C.
Okay, and you're working nationally, right, with a lot of different states to license and regulate marijuana.
That's correct.
So it's legal and healthy and quality and regulated well. Let me get right into this because there's some polling that's been done that shows most Nevadans favor recreational use. This is way different than what the polls showed 10 years ago, correct? Why the difference?
Public support has improved over the years because people have seen that, first of all, medical marijuana sales haven't caused the moon to fall from the sky. So if it's okay for people to open up a store and sell medical marijuana to patients, then why not also be able to sell it to someone who's 21 and older? Also, we have real life experience now, which is in Colorado and in Washington State. Those two laws passed in November 2012. So marijuana has been legal for adult use in those two states for a few years, and everything's just peachy in those two states, right? Teenage use hasn't changed, adult use hasn't changed, tax revenues are pouring in for the construction of public schools, law enforcement have more time to spend on the things that they should be spending their time on. The people in Colorado are just as happy with legalization now as they were a few years ago, and so that's a good hint that other states should get into that game and end prohibition so that the money can be used for good things.
I think that most people think that hey, if you legalize marijuana, there'll be more DUIs. And what's the record in Colorado with that?
Colorado, the experience so far has shown that there's really no difference with marijuana DUI or marijuana-related car accidents or marijuana-related fatalities. It hasn't really changed, but it kind of makes sense that it wouldn't change because the same number of people are using marijuana in Colorado as before, the same number of drivers or non-drivers as before. So it would be weird for those numbers to change. And so luckily, the numbers are in fact showing the DUI is not a problem in Colorado, and therefore we could have comfort knowing that if we legalize marijuana in Nevada, that the driving situation will get no better and no worse.
We see a lot of stories like this time after time, whether it's on CNN, with Charlotte's Web, with children having seizures. I've experienced with my own daughter. You see this all the time?
I do. I have personal experience. My grandmother has breast cancer and has used medical marijuana in a state it's legal for her. But I've also heard amazing stories. I work with many facilities here in Nevada, and they tell stories all the time of patients walking in and how it's helped alleviate pain or reduce their cancer, or even some claim to cure it. It's amazing the positive effects we've seen from the medical marijuana.
I find it very interesting that there's a certain public perception that the marijuana customer is a young, pothead that's coming in to get pot. But when you go into these dispensaries that we have here in Nevada, these are all vets, they're all elderly people. The typical customer is over 50 years old.
Yeah, I think just because a customer looks healthy, that should not be used against them. For example, Montel Williams has been using marijuana to treat his MS for at least 17 years. If Montel Williams walks into a dispensary to buy marijuana, he looks really healthy. Mm-hmm. All right, does that mean that he is in fact healthy? Well, actually, the reason he's able to walk into the dispensary is because he's using marijuana. He's able to walk.
Well, he looks different than Willie Nelson when he's walking in, right?
That's right.
That's right. I think they've seen a staggering number of senior citizens, but also young professionals that don't look the typical expected marijuana patient part.
So, so the arguments in favor of this is, hey, people are smoking anyway, so let's regulate it, make it more difficult for teenagers to get it. Let's tax it. Let's create a revenue base. Is that the biggest argument in favor of it?
I think the two biggest arguments are, yes, create jobs and tax it and use the tax money for good things rather than having, gangs and Mexican drug cartels using the money for bad things. So there's the money argument, which is really obvious, even to people who are prohibitionists. They would at least admit that prohibition wastes money.
And these cartels are not paying taxes on the money they're making anyway,
I don't
right?
like how they spend their
are.
money either.
Yeah.
So that's one argument, and the other is law enforcement surely should be doing other things rather than sniffing under people's doors for marijuana. Almost everyone would agree that law enforcement should put a priority on violent crimes and property crimes over nonviolent marijuana use. So the American people are already with us on the top two arguments. And then, the third and the fourth arguments could be, yes, teenagers will have less access if they have to get carded in order to buy marijuana. And the ultimate argument is Colorado is already working. So we don't even have to imagine what could be. We already have it just a couple of states over. And so therefore we should do what works and not remain in this entrenched prohibition that Nevada's had for decades.
And we're projecting in Nevada that if Question 2 does pass, it would result in, what, $500 million in tax revenue for our schools district?
Yeah, I've seen a couple different studies or projected numbers, but they all fall around that range of, several millions for schools.
One of the biggest arguments against it is that people say oftentimes it's a gateway drug. And my personal observation on this is that what makes it gateway is that it's illegal. That the person that you're buying an illegal drug from is also selling heroin, pills, speed, and every other illegal substance. So if they're selling a teenager marijuana, their next step is a gateway to a stronger drug. If you legalize it, it takes the gateway aspect out of it.
Yeah, I like to refer to the gateway concept as really it's the drug dealer as the gateway. That we are, that it's not marijuana, it's the fact that a young teenager or is with an impressionable mind is meeting a drug dealer in a dark alley, and that drug dealer has an incentive to give them stronger, more costly drugs. And so then that's how people get addicted to the stronger drugs.
Why did marijuana ever become illegal? When you look at the pharmaceutical market, essentially every product that they make is plant-based. Comes from some plant somewhere. This is a medicinal plant.
Well, the origin of prohibition was racism, and so what we saw back in the 19-teens and 1920s, Mexicans were coming across the border and using marijuana, and that was a lot of it actually came from Mexico originally. And it was hard to ban Mexicans, but you can ban the Mexicans' behavior. And so there was a lot of southern states that were banning marijuana as shorthand for banning Mexicans, or at least putting them in jail. Now that was southern states. And then northern states, New England in particular, they didn't actually have Mexicans in the 19-teens and 1920s so much, but as a way of preventing them from ever getting to New England, they would ban marijuana. And so that's how you see these state laws prohibiting marijuana creeping up from the south to the north, until ultimately in 1937, the federal government thought, well, if all the states are doing it, it must be a good idea. And so then Congress banned marijuana in 1937 nationally.
Well, so we have, how many states now have medical or recreational marijuana? Is it 23 or something?
There's 25 states 25? That now have legal medical marijuana, with Pennsylvania and Ohio being very recent. And then there's 4 states that have regulated marijuana like alcohol, including Colorado.
So that's already the majority of the country.
Well, the 4 are a subset of the 25.
Oh, okay. So we're halfway there.
Yeah.
But there's ballot questions on multiple states this November. California and Nevada being the most interesting, and us here in Nevada, right?
Yeah.
And I guess there's another state or two that's also
Arizona.
Arizona. Oh, Arizona, yeah. That would obviously make an impact as well.
That's right. And then there's two more states, Massachusetts and Maine, will also be voting on legalization. So there's 5 states on one day voting on whether to legalize marijuana like Colorado.
So in Nevada, we have 2 questions. Question 1, which deals with background checks for guns, and question 2, which deals for the recreational use of marijuana. So a vote of yes on question 2 would mean?
That you should regulate marijuana like alcohol.
Like alcohol. Means, yeah, let's have recreational, let's have it highly regulated. Our marijuana industry now in Nevada is more tightly wound, I think, than our gaming regulations. Oh, you know,
yeah, I work day in and day out, and it's extremely regulated. Every piece of marijuana is tracked and reported to the state. Every facility is inspected very frequently, and it's highly regulated. I would agree with you. It's at least as tight as gaming, if not stricter.
Yeah, and Nevada's laws become somewhat of a prototype for other states as well, because we're so highly regulated here.
That's right. Nevada does regulation very well. We have the gaming industry that has done extremely well, and our state government knows how to regulate, and they've done a good job with marijuana, the medical marijuana industry, and I expect that they also would do extremely well with recreational marijuana.
So as we're moving down toward November, what is your biggest task? Is education? I mean, because it seems like there's a propensity for people to be cautious about legalizing marijuana. Right. So
that's right.
But
yeah,
once you
right.
explain to people what the true facts are and the statistics are, then they most of the time change their mind.
Yeah, so luckily in Nevada, the polling in favor of this initiative is in the mid-50s. So if the election were held today, we would win.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we need to do is just ensure that the voters who already are planning to vote yes don't get scared at the last minute.
Mm-hmm.
So the prohibitionists in Nevada who want to cling to this failed policy of started as racism but now is actually just a money suck, and also a criminal justice problem for a lot of people who are racial minorities or are poor. These people who want to cling to that horrible prohibition are just going to try to scare the voters, right? They're going to talk about teenagers using marijuana as if the teenagers are already not using marijuana, right? So they'll try to scare people. All we have to do is actually show people this proposal is actually not that interesting because it's already being done in 4 other states. And if anything bad was happening in those 4 states, you would have already heard about it. So we can feel comfortable. And therefore, if we can just keep the people on our team who are planning to vote yes, we'll win handily on election day.
So you're attracting voters who are, maybe liberal and at the same time libertarian, people who think that, hey, we have a right to do whatever we want to do as long as we're not hurting somebody else. You have, that crowd. You have, a lot of Democrats, a lot of Republicans, a lot of the independents. It kind of crosses all the party lines.
That's right. So it's really obvious that you should vote yes if you're libertarian, or if you're very liberal, or if you're a marijuana user.
But the Republicans like it for all the tax revenue and the funding.
Right.
Yeah.
So what we want to do is appeal to the voters who don't use marijuana, for example. Now, if you don't use marijuana, why would you vote yes? Well, the question is, if you're a non-marijuana user, how much of your tax money do you want to spend going after those marijuana users? Is it that important to you that you're willing to write a check?
Every time a cop arrests somebody, right, and you're going to take the police time, go to the arrest, bring them down to the Clark County Detention Center, process them, put them in, it's a couple $1,000s.
Yeah, that's right.
Every time.
And as a mother, I would rather not have that money spent and have money going to the schools my children are in.
Which are always in dire need. Hey,
that's right.
Amanda, Rob, thank you so much. This November, we'll be covering this issue continuously between now and November. This is question 2, the recreational use of or marijuana, regulating it like we regulate alcohol and other things in the state. So vote yes on question 2. And if you're a Neil Diamond fan, we'll be right back. We have a surprise for you.
If you forgot to pay your cell phone bill, it's your fault. But if you've been hurt in an accident, injured at work, or denied Social Security benefits, it's your fault if you don't call Ed. Enough said. Call Ed. EdBernstein.com.